Hey guys, my name is Artemis and I'm a professional League of Legends coach. I've been playing this game for 10 years since its inception and coaching for 5, and I'm super excited to be working with PlayVS to help give you guys the tools that you need to bring a League of Legends team to your school. This is something I'm really passionate about because you guys really are the pioneers of high school esports educators, so I'm super excited and humbled to be working with you guys. Okay, so let's get into it. All right. Now, League of Legends is a 5 versus 5 strategy game played on Summoner's Rift. I want you guys to think of Summoner's Rift the way you would think of a chessboard. Each team has 5 players controlling 5 champions, and these champions are spread out on the map. And the goal is to destroy the Nexus, which is being defended in the corner of the map. Each team has one. I want you guys to think of this like chess, okay? So the goal of chess is very simple, although the game is very complex, right? It's a simple goal, destroy the king. In League of Legends, it's the same simple goal, destroy the enemy nexus, but how do we do that, right? The strategy is a complex part. The game is very simple. As we sort of look at the map and sort of investigate the structures and the terrain of the map, that's where we're going to be spending the majority of our time because it's the most important part of this game. Really, for you guys shouldn't be worrying about really the champions necessarily. There's like 160 champions. Learning each of their abilities and all of this information is going to feel really overwhelming because there's so much specific knowledge. So what I want you guys to do is really break this game down at a high level. It's really about how their positions on the map. And if you can rotate for a numbers advantage, let's say we can get a 3 versus 2 here, maybe a 2 versus 1 here, how much faster from point A to B are we than our opponent, right? These are the kinds of strategic questions that you guys should be thinking of and not so much the nitty-gritty in-game specifics, okay? The terrain is super important to the game. It's split up into 3 lanes. We have bot lane, mid lane, and top lane. You'll have your AD carry and your support player in bot lane. You'll have your mid laner in mid lane. You'll have your top laner in top lane. And your jungler traverses the jungle, which you see as this part of the map that sort of connects all 3 lanes. The jungler's job, he has many. He has a lot of different jobs, but his primary function is a supportive element for these 3 laners. His job is to sort of either guide his laners forward and help them through the game, or attack the enemy laners and try and set them behind as the game goes on. What is a jungle camp? So a jungle camp is the area inside your jungle or the enemy jungle in which a monster spawns. And when these monsters are killed, they provide gold and experience, which is, again, is just a resource for your jungler. As the game moves on, these resources become team-wide, and now your team can start getting access to these resources. They're not exclusive for your jungler as the team progresses throughout the game. And these camps will respawn every minute and 30 seconds. Each time they respawn, they become worth a little bit more in terms of gold and experience. So one of the principles of jungling and one of the principles of your jungle camps is to maximize that resource. And what that means is you don't want your jungle camps to be alive and just sitting there for a long time, because you're essentially leaving potential gold and experience on the table. So as soon as those jungle camps respawn, we want to cycle them, get them down, get their next respawn up so they become worth more. The map is again partitioned by the river, which is going down the middle, and you'll see this called blue side and red side, the 2 sides of the river. Depending on which side you are on any given week, you'll either be blue side or red side. Before the game starts, there's something called draft phase, where the coach and the players go ahead and they pick their 5 champions. We're going to talk more about this later, but for now, again, don't worry so much about the champions. Really just think of them like chess pieces, okay? The knight, he moves differently than the bishop. They attack differently. They have different strengths. They have different weaknesses. Champions are no different, okay? They have different attacks. They have different strengths. They have different weaknesses. How do we win? Right? I said that the goal of the game is to destroy the Nexus. Sure, that's simple, but how do we do that is often much more complex. What I'm going to attempt to do is I'm going to break this down into early game, mid game, and late game, and I'm going to sort of try and give you guys tactics to be looking out for at every stage of the game. First thing I'd like to do is introduce the clock. Okay, so in League of Legends, it's not like soccer where you start at 90 minutes and you count down. We start at 0 and we count up. Okay, we could count up for infinity. There might be no stopping, but every game ends. Okay, there's structures built into the game that kind of speeds it up the longer it goes, if that makes sense. So the longer the game is going on, the more on a knife's edge it is, if that makes sense. Like a 50-minute game is teetering on a knife's edge. It could go one way or the other at the drop of the hat and the game is just over. But a game that's only 5 minutes in, it's much more malleable, it's much more plastic. There can be large give and take pushes and pull before the game is really decided. Okay, so as the clock counts up, we're kind of approaching a precipice and we're approaching a knife's edge. We're approaching some kind of conclusion. Okay, and that's the way you have to think of the clock counting up. Second thing we're going to introduce is two things, gold and experience. Both of these are the two primary resources in League of Legends. We use gold to buy items from the shopkeeper. These give us, they make us stronger. And experience increases our level. And as we level up, we get stronger directly just through stats. And we also get access to new spells. I just want you guys to think of gold and experience as resources. Okay, and just like war or any game of strategy, typically we want to either accrue resources for ourselves or deny resources for the enemy team. Third concept I want to introduce is, again, it's about the board, and it's called controlling space on the board. We control space in League of Legends really with our bodies. There's two ways, one with our bodies and two with wards. Our bodies is very simple, right? Like, we're controlling the space with our bodies, we're inserting ourselves in this position, and we're defending it. Let's say we have control of the center of terrain element with all kinds of different choke points and pathways through it and around it. If we have control of the center, it's going to be very, very difficult for our opponents to traverse, right? Like, they either have to take the long way around, go all the way around us, or they can try and break through with some kind of brute force attack through the center, but oftentimes the team who's holding their ground is going to have the advantage. We control the center of the board to sort of move our control outwards. You should be looking at the shape of the map. You should be looking at the shape of your 5 players, what they look like, sort of connect the dots, and then connect the dots of the enemy 5 players and sort of see how you're controlling the map. So now we're going to talk about draft. Draft is at the start of every game. This is determined beforehand. You'll either be blue side or red side. Draft is the period of the game. It starts before the match where we go ahead and we pick our 5 champions. First thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about the structure a bit of the draft. It's the same structure every time. There's bans and there's picks. I encourage you guys to look up the structure or talk to your players. There's 2 different types of picks when we're selecting a champion, right? Because we're going to pick a champion for each of our 5 players. We're going to group them into 2 categories. It's either going to be a blind pick or it's a counter pick. Okay, we're going to call it a blind pick. If, let's say, I'm the mid laner of my team, I'm going to pick first. If I'm blue side, first pick. I don't see anything from the enemy team. I don't see any of their 5 champions, but I'm going to pick my champion blind. The second kind of pick, just by definition, is a counter pick, where it's the opposite. You see exactly, let's say I'm the mid laner, but this time I see his champion. He's picked first, and I'm picking after. I have the opportunity to now counter pick. Draft strategy is far too complex for this video, but what I want you guys to focus on is the idea of blind picks and counter picks, and the idea of like equity and draft resources. Like, we want to be using our resources in draft mindfully. So we don't want to be forcing the same player to be blind picking every game, because that's sort of like a burden for him. At the same time, we don't want to be giving the same player counter pick every game, because that could be viewed as like favoritism. Just work with your players on the balance of these blind picks and these counter picks while you think of the overall game. And again, let your players do a lot of the heavy lifting there. Okay, so now we're going to talk about strategy of draft. Again, this is going to be really quick. A lot of this your players can take for you, I think. When you're picking champions in draft, I want you guys to be thinking of something that we call win conditions. Okay, and a win condition is just a way for a coach that he looks at the game, he looks at the draft, and he says, oh, I see how we're going to win the game. We're going to do A, B, and we're going to do C. And that's how we're going to win, okay? You want to be able to identify a win condition at every phase of the game. So early game, mid game, late game, you want to be able to see how this composition plays at every point in the game. Depending on the champions you have, your goals will be different, and again, it's a bit outside the scope of this video. But what I want you guys to think of, you want to have at least some way to be proactive in the early game. You want your team to be able to play and like be attacking and have attacking chances. So just check in with your team to make sure that they had attacking chances, and check in to make sure that the draft is equitable. And then I think after that, you can sort of start moving out. But I think those would be your first 2 goals, would be make sure that in every single draft, you get attacking chances, that your team is actually able to play on the front foot, and that also that they feel like it's like relatively fair and that nobody is getting screwed. We're going to take the next couple minutes and we're going to talk about tactics. Okay, and what are tactics? Tactics are essentially like strategy, moves, what we can do to sort of exert our will in our opponent. Let's talk early game tactics. We talked a little bit about control of the center before, and again, that's really all we want to do. We want to be taking control of the center. In addition to that, we want to establish what's called a strong side, and I want you guys to sort of bisect the map down mid lane and think of like top side and bot side, okay? And the idea is that you really can't play on both sides of the map at the same time, just by nature. Like your jungler, he's a resource again. He can only be on one side of the map or the other. your team can really only be attacking one part of the map or the other. So we want to sort of designate a side of the map as our strong side and be able to play towards that side and start executing inside the enemy jungle, start executing in the enemy side of the map, but just start executing on what we believe is our strong side of the map. How we create this strong side is through vision. It's just what we see, okay? So it's just information. And vision in this game is given by ourselves, our champions, so we can see around us. We can see around our structures, our turrets, and we can also see around something called a ward. And a ward is bought for gold in the shop in-game. And you place it down on the ground and it gives you vision around it, okay? And how we take control of the board is through vision, okay? So we're either going to be taking vision for ourselves to get information and see parts of the map where we can then make it play, or conversely, we're looking to deny vision from the enemy and make it so they can't see. These are two concepts you should apply to your strong side. So think about controlling vision on your strong side. Think about denying vision on your strong side. And those are your two kind of main objectives for your early game. Once we get this strong side control with our vision, with our champions, once we start to sort of get this piece of the map and we sink our teeth into it, and now we sort of have some kind of control. Let's say it's around bot side. Let's say we're playing bot side, strong side. Let's say I now have sunk my hooks into the dragon area. My next step is to start using my strong side, using my control to build incremental advantages. So you're not going to look to hit a home run or a grand slam at 5 minutes into the game. Because like I said, the game's not going to end until 25, 30 minutes. So you can't be looking to win the game too quickly or too soon. But what you can do is you can build these small advantages that over time will translate into something bigger. So when we talk about control of the dragon area, like everything in League of Legends, it's always relative to control of the center. So this starts with control of the right side of mid. And we're going to take control by denying vision. We're going to do this by placing pink wards in the line bush and the pixel bush. With these two pink wards, we're going to be able to move between mid lane and dragon without being seen. After we take vision denial of the center, we're going to move our vision up. Okay, and what this means is we're going to start dropping green wards to take vision ourselves on the enemy ramp and also deeper into the enemy jungle. Once we get these 3 wards down inside the enemy jungle, and once we've taken control of the center and denied vision of the river, we can start to play. This is what I would call a setup. Now we have a dragon setup. And with this dragon setup, the most important thing that I want to illustrate is control of the box between dragon and mid lane. And with this box controlled, the enemy team has to make a choice of whether they are going to control the area around the dragon or control the area around their mid turret. Because notice, they can no longer use the path that cuts through the box to move between their mid turret and the dragon. They are essentially cut off. So positionally and tactically, we've forked our opponent and made them to make a choice. They can either defend the center or defend the dragon objective, but they can't defend both without losing something. So after we take this control and once we take a setup, in professional play, oftentimes this dragon would just be conceded. It would just be given away as free because it would be considered uncontestable. So your goal in mid-game is to take that strong side and start taking little small things from your enemy. So just take one dragon, okay? Look to take their jungle camps away from them. Look to make their bot laner lose one wave to his turret, right? Talk to your players about these options, but again, encourage them to be creative, but you as a coach, what you want them to do is 1, establish the strong side, okay, boom, and then 2, use my strong side to build incremental advantages, okay? That's going to bring us to late game now. After we've been building incremental advantages the whole game, let's say we get to about a 3,000 or 4,000 gold lead, what do we do now? How do we actually win? Okay, like how do we close the game? This is a complicated part of the game because it's relative to your draft. How you close will be relative to the 5 champions that you have selected. There's a few ways to do this very generally. The first would be to secure Baron. Spawns in the top left side of the map. This is a neutral objective. If you can secure that with a high press, you can then use that to go on and win the game. As we work our control higher and higher and higher and deeper into their base, we're going to constrict the amount of room that the enemy team has to work with. And our goal is to really sort of keep them inside their base. And after we've accomplished that, we'll be able to then take this neutral objective Baron that we can then use to close. You can do the same with Elder Dragon. It's on the bottom side of the map. This unlocks after taking 4 of the elemental dragons. Okay, so we're going to kind of go back to the board now and sort of try and take everything in. Don't overcomplicate it, okay? At the end of the day, this is just chess. It looks really weird, and there's only 5 chess pieces, but it's just chess. We want to control the center. We want to then press higher and higher and higher, shrink them in, and then capture the king. Okay, that really is the goal. And as you watch the game, I encourage you guys to just look at it top down. Just think of the movement of your 5 champions across the map, against the movement of the enemy 5 champions across the map. Even me, as a professional, when I analyze the game, 99% of what I do is from this top down, just looking at movement and how these things interact, okay? Finally, how do we drill League of Legends, or how do we practice? It's a very difficult game to drill because we don't have the opportunity to start in the middle or start at the end or break it down into smaller pieces the way we do in traditional sports. We really can only play continuously from start to finish, and that's the majority of our practice, which is similar to chess and other games. So what we do is we find another team, another school, and we play a scrimmage. And after the game, we go back as a team and we watch the game to figure out what we could have done differently or what we thought we did well. And we just do some replay analysis the same way you would do in basketball, for example. We do have the opportunity to drill the beginning of the game in League of Legends, and you can do this by playing the opening 5-10 minutes and then just closing the game and doing it again. And just playing 10 minutes, quitting the game and doing it again. And it's ideal if you have a roster of 10 to do this with, but you could find in maybe another high school that is interested in training this way, and you could find like a practice partner. But the idea here is we're drilling the early game and essentially trying to solve the early game so we can get it to a point where we're consistent and we can execute on our game plan consistently. But other than early game drills, most resources are going to be involved around replay analysis of your matches and of your scrimmages against other high schools. Be flexible. I think for you guys as educators, that's your strength, right? You're not a League of Legends expert, you're an educator. And part of that is you're going to be identifying your players' strengths and weaknesses and trying to empower them in any way you can. That means in-game, empowering them to make choices and be a leader. You can't talk to these guys in-game, so let them do their thing. But it also means outside of the game, like in practice, encouraging them to contribute in review when you're going over game concepts we're trying to learn together. Sort of encourage them to self-coach, to be team captains, encourage leadership in your team. I think that's super important. And finally, add structure. I think that traditional sports structure is amazing for young men and young women. I think that you learn so many values that can help you your whole life, and I do think that those traditional sports values work very well in League of Legends, speaking from experience. Somebody who's played sports their whole life, somebody who coaches sports now their whole life, really talk to the other coaches at your schools and use these resources available to you as an educator to sort of build out yourself as a true coach. You do not have to be a League of Legends expert to really be a good League of Legends coach, especially at the high school level. So that's what I want you guys to focus on. Use this video as sort of a top-down guide, but for the most part, just educate yourself and be curious. Thanks, guys. Okay, that does it, everybody. Thanks for watching. Hopefully this wasn't too overwhelming, but watch it a few times, and if you have questions, Google is a good friend. It's a good resource, and I'll provide some further resources down below as well. So good luck this season, everybody.